chat, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Robin Eissler. I'm the founder of BoosterHub, and tonight we're going to be talking about Booster Club concessions. One of the more important things that our boosters do, both in staffing with volunteers and running it, usually for a profit as a fundraiser. So we'll dive into some strategies, some best practices, some tips and tricks. We usually keep the webinars pretty strategic and high level, and then give you a list of takeaway actions at the end. I definitely encourage you to ask questions in the chat. You're welcome as attendees to share your experiences with other boosters. This is a great chance to collaborate with booster clubs across the country. So we welcome you to do so. We'll go ahead and dive in tonight. So when we're talking about concessions, one thing I just wanted to mention is if you stay tuned till the end, we've got some special tools for you, some calculators, and also if you're not a BoosterHub subscriber, we have a discount for the subscription on BoosterHub. So we'll dive into concessions. So the first thing we'll talk about is it a fundraiser? Does it count as a fundraiser? How can you use it as a fundraiser? A little bit about licensing and food safety. That's really important. What tools to use, payment solutions, some of the winning food choices, operations and how to staff your concession stand, how to maximize your profit, and then some tips and tricks. So one of the things that always kind of frightens me when people say our concession stand, it just kind of breaks even, but we're not even sure of that. We don't really know. It's kind of a scary thing. You've got a lot of money running through your concessions. You're buying products and selling products. So you really should have a plan in place to know, whether or not you're making money. It's a really important thing to do. Sorry, my Zoom just refreshed on me and just making sure we're still there. We are. Okay, good. So the first question is it a fundraiser? So a lot of schools, you have a limited amount of fundraisers that you can do every year. Typically, those are fundraising events or activities. In most schools, your concession stand does not count as a fundraiser. And that's great news because it's another way to make money for your booster club and it doesn't have to count under one of those formal fundraisers. So I like to use it for that reason. It's a great way to bring in, $5, $10, in some cases, $50,000 for your program. And so you really need to build a strategy around it to make sure you're doing that. Some of the things that you should be doing is tracking inventory in your fundraiser if you're in your concessions. If you're a BoosterHub subscriber, we give you that ability in the store. It's a great reason to use the store, and the cashier screen is it calculates all those items sold, so you can see how many you sold, and that is good for two purposes. The first is it's going to tell you how much money should be there, and the second is it's going to give you some guidance on how much you should buy for your next event, so you're not overbuying product. You need to know your break-even point on an item, and we've got some calculators later on that we'll look into that on. And how do you maximize sales? We've got some tips on how to do that, some with pricing, some with timing, how you can really push those sales, and then making it profitable overall. Let's dive in here. Let's go to the next screen. Oh, I think I went too forward. Sorry, my Zoom is just giving me a hard time tonight, so bear with me. Get this out of here. Okay, let's see. We'll get back here. There we go, licensing. So we'll start with licensing. I recommend that you have at least one person in your booster club who has at least a food service license. You can get these online. They're $5 or $10. I think AAA food handlers like $6.95. It'll take you 30 minutes to an hour to complete the course. And it's just really helpful because it gives you some little insights into what you should be doing with food handling and cleanliness and packaging and things like that. So it's helpful if you're going to do anything. For instance, if somebody says, hey, let's sell hot dogs, I'm going to warm them up ahead of time and put them in a crock pot. There's some guidelines you need to follow, and just having someone that's been trained in that would be helpful. The other thing that you may want to look at is your local and state business licenses. So some states and some cities require a license to run a concession stand. A lot of them give waivers for concessions at school events or fundraising events. But in some cases, you do need a local and a state license. So you'll want to look into your local authority for that. You'll want to look into sales tax permit. So in most states, food is exempt. There are some states where some food is exempt and some is not. If you're selling any type of merchandise in your concession stand, which is definitely a good idea, it's often taxable. And so you'll want to make sure that you've got your sales tax processes and permits in place because you'll need those. If you're doing any kind of open cooking, open fire cooking on a hot plate or with a fryer, or even in some cases, just some popcorn machines, you may need a fire department permit. So something else to look into. Your city can probably give you guidance on that. And then you also want to carry insurance. So particularly in concessions, there are dangers if you're running any type of cooking machinery. You know, there's opportunities for people to get burnt, things like that. A lot of people think they fall under the school's insurance, and you do not. So if the Booster Club, for example, owns the popcorn machine and the popcorn oil spills and burns somebody, the Booster Club is liable for that. So there's some great insurance companies out there, AIM Insurance or RV Nuzio Insurance. They have great policies. They're couple $100 a year that'll give you some liability insurance and also some other good insurance coverages for your booster clubs. So just some things to think about before you get started. In food safety, in addition to the food handling course, there's a certified food protection manager. If you are doing like actual cooking, you're running, you know, we have a high school in Texas that does a fish fry at their Friday night football games. If you're doing things like that, you'll definitely want to get some more advanced food safety training because that'll really help make sure you're following all those protocols. You'll want to look into temperature control. So it's really important that if you're handling any kind of prepared food, that it stay at certain temperatures. And so you'll want to know those guidelines. Again, if you take any of those courses, you'll have that information. This one's really important. A lot of times, you know, people are just trying to help, and you get a dad or someone who says, hey, I'll come and I'll grill the food and then we can sell hamburgers. It'll be great. Just a suggestion, make sure that if you're using a grill, that you move any kind of propane and fuel away from the fire. There was a Booster Club event a few years ago in Texas where the volunteer was killed because of this. The grill exploded and killed them. And so just something to think about. People get excited and don't think of those best practices. So if you're cooking with an open flame, you for sure want to look into all the safety practices that you should be doing. Hand washing protocol, make sure you've got a good hand washing station. Gloves anytime you're handling food, you know, even if it's just pulling pizza slices out of the box. You should have gloves on, hair restraints, serving tools. And if you're doing all packaged foods, okay, we're just doing candy and we're not cooking anything, you probably don't have anything to really worry about other than maybe some temperature control, depending on what you're selling. So that can simplify things if you don't want to get into all the food side. It's easier sometimes to use the packaged food. A note is sometimes you'll tend to make more money on the cooked food. There's some ways to do that, particularly if you're having big events. So that sometimes is worth it to go through all these rules and protocols. We'll talk about tools. So cooking equipment, you know, this is everything from your popcorn machine. A lot of schools do cookies, warming ovens, crock pots, ice machines. You may want to consider sharing with other boosters. So a lot of boosters don't operate year round. So if you're a sports program, perhaps, you know, the fall and the spring programs can share equipment. There's also leasing and renting may be an option. So if you're using a machine 5 nights a year, maybe you don't need to buy it. Maybe you can just rent it. So there's a lot of your equipment rental places have the various types of machines that you may be using. For storage and prep, you'll want to do an analysis on coolers versus refrigerated units. This can be helpful if you're having to ice everything down and drain everything at the end of the night. and your items aren't staying temperature controlled during the week, you may want to consider a refrigerated unit if your school district will allow it. It's a conversation that you may want to have with your facilities people in your school district and determine what may be the best option. I know our school district put in refrigerated units about halfway through my term, and that was really helpful because it just saved a whole process of ice and draining and cleanup. We could just leave our drinks in the refrigerators throughout the season, and it made it really easy to keep things cool and not have to do that extra work. You definitely want service and safety equipment. So, any type of, if you're going to have you'll need an eye wash station, things like that. And then food storage, supplies like foil and napkins and bags and utensils, cleaning supplies, and first aid kits. So sometimes it's easy to forget those if you're kind of getting all the food and then you forgot, oh, you need something to serve the food with. I know we used to do warm cookies, and one year we ran out of the little bags to serve the cookies, and all of a sudden it became much more complicated. So just some things to think about, put on your checklist. Now let's talk about the money. So we just deposit the money and have no record of how much product we sold. So even if you're doing a cash count at the end of the night, if you don't have some idea of your inventory and how much you sold, the cash count doesn't really help because you don't know how much should be there. So you want some sort of check and balance with your money, and that usually comes from inventory and how much you sold. So you want to have a way to get both of those numbers if possible: how much you started with, how much you sold, and this is how much money we should have collected. So that comes to looking at various payment solutions. So the typical old standby has been cash at concessions. We are seeing a big shift away from this, and for a lot of reasons. So one, it's a lot more work on the volunteers. You have to go to the bank and get the change. You have to count it. You have to deposit it. It also has the highest potential for fraud. It's really easy if you're volunteer working concessions to skim some money right off the till. Nobody notices. If you're a high volume concession stand, this could be large amounts of money. So cash, there's just not a great way to do that, particularly if you don't have inventory or not ringing things up. And again, it has that extra work of counting and deposits and driving to the bank and getting the change. Most programs now we see are moving to credit cards or some sort of tap to pay solution. And what you'll find is, yep, these have a fee, generally around 3%. But your sales go up when you do this. And I have seen this across the board with every booster club that has moved from cash only to cash and credit cards. Their sales go up between 35 and 40%. And that's because people will just buy more when they're paying with a credit card. So don't be afraid of those 3% fees, because you can see if your sales go up 40%, you're winning on this deal. You're getting a lot more product sold because it's easier for the purchaser. Definitely recommend to have a tap to pay or QR solution. That really can help speed up your checkouts and keep your lines moving. And then you'll want to consider what the fees are and the setup costs for all these types of equipment. So there's a lot of solutions out there. I'm a little partial to BoosterHub, but there's a lot of ways that you can take payment there at checkout. Just make sure that you do have one that is counting what is sold and then offsetting that with an inventory. And you'll want to look into point of sale systems. So if you're a high volume concession stand, you're going to want a good point of sale device, something that can do, a couple thousand transactions a night. So you'll want to consider that. Sometimes if you get into, a Venmo or something like that, it's not going to be able to support the volume. There'll be too many transactions. Charlotte, yes, we will send out a recording of this tomorrow. After it's done this evening, we'll get it loaded and get a recording out to you. So let's talk about the winning food choices. So we want to look for high margin items, things that we can have 100% markup. So things that maybe I can buy for $1, sell for $2. You'll definitely want to try to find stuff that's shelf stable. So something that would last you a season so it doesn't go bad. Now there's sometimes, you can sell perishable food at certain events, and that is a good idea. But for the most part, you want to stick with stuff that can stick around for a little while. pre-made if possible, unless you have a great team. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Adjust with the season. Chocolate gets harder to sell in the warmer months because it melts. So you may want hot chocolate in the winter. Just think about that. And definitely put together combo deals. These are great ways to get, sometimes it's just hard for people to decide. So, all the fast food places have done this, a number one or number two or number three. Some of that's just for ease of ordering, but it also helps build your margins. So think of some ideas for that. We'll talk about those in a couple minutes. So what's the food with the highest potential markup? I've got a image here to give you an idea, to give you a hint. Popcorn. So why do you see it sold at every concession stand? Because it cost about 10 or 20 cents and we could sell it for $3 or $4 or $5. So it's a great one. It's usually worth investing in the popcorn machine. I don't know why, but everybody goes up to the concession stand, they buy popcorn, they love it, and it's really cheap, it's shelf stable, it meets all those requirements. Soda's another one, still really great margins on any sodas, so definitely a good one. Hot dogs are easy. It's like a real tangible meal, and can feed people, but it's cheap and you can warm them up in the microwave, that type of thing. Nachos, they have kind of a high perceived value, so you can get fancy with toppings for not a lot of money and charge extra for that. So there's some great markups in nachos. Candy, of course, has a really long shelf life. I try to avoid chocolate other than like the M&M products. Tacos, if you're going to do fresh food, have really high markup. That's why we see all these taco restaurants in the United States now, because they have great margins. They're easy to prepare. So they work well in concessions too, if you're going to do prepared food. Bottled water, a suggestion on this is to get a sponsor. So if you can have someone buy, a pallet of water and they can put their logo on it and then you can just sell it, you can have really good markup on that as well. And consider adding some seasonal or regional favorites. Sometimes you can put a premium on those. You could do a hot chocolate with a fancy marshmallow and a chocolate drizzle and, charge $6 or $7 for that. And you may be able to capitalize that seasonal advantage. When it comes to operations, the best run concession stands I've seen, and I've been to quite a few, have dedicated roles. So you should have a person who does the register or the checkout, a person who is preparing the food if there's food, nachos, putting the cheese and the chili on, and a runner that goes in between. That usually works really well. Usually you should have, one cashier, one runner, and maybe a cook, maybe serving 2 cashiers and 2 runners. You should definitely put together a training checklist or just do a little video. You can pop a little video. You can put it on your website or QR code and say, hey, here's the opening shift, here's the closing shift, here's the things you need to do, and walk around with your phone. It's really quick and easy to do. And then you don't have to, be there every time to launch volunteers. They can kind of self-launch. Think about your strategic shift scheduling. Don't change over at halftime. Like that's your busiest time of the night or the day. So you want to have your shifts, rolling so that you don't have half of everybody leaving and half of everybody coming in, especially at those critical times. So just be strategic about your shift scheduling. And your community, reach out to people beyond just those in your booster club. Our local community has a very large retirement community nearby, and a lot of those people are former parents and used to be engaged with their kids' activities, and they would love to come out and work in concession stand. One of the things I also recommend is do an alumni night, not your students, but the parents of the former students, and say, hey, we're doing a alumni concession stand night, and see if you can get some other dozen of your former parents to come out. It's usually a great way to keep them connected to the program and help alleviate those volunteer burdens. Molly, you said we're looking at hiring paid student managers. I think that that's a great idea. I'm always a big fan of getting the students involved. I think in some school districts that may be limited. Some school districts have policies where the students aren't allowed to handle the money. So that would just be something I would check with your local district on. But I'm a big fan of getting the students involved. This is all for them. And the more that they can do in the booster club, the better. So I can tell you my kids did it all, except for handling the money because they weren't allowed to. But that may be the only thing you want to look at. Operations, so prep work, you want to keep the space organized and clean. I've been in both a well-organized concession stand and a poorly organized one. You get a lot more done, you sell a lot more, and you have a lot less waste in an organized space. Try to stock at the end of the shift so it's ready to go if you can. Not all programs can do this. I know a lot of our programs move all their stuff in at the beginning and move it back out at the end. But if you have the opportunity and your concession stand stays yours throughout the season, consider stocking at the end of the shift so you walk in, you're ready to go. And then any food that you are serving, if you can pre-cook it if possible and then put it in a warming drawer, warming oven, that's really the best way to go. When we talk about the quality control, you'll want to have your temperature checks every 2 hours. Make sure that the first food in is the first food out, so you don't have, food getting older because people are pulling from the back of the drawer. And you can do that as part of your training. Always take the sandwich in the front and put the new sandwiches in the back. And then clean your equipment at the end of each event. It takes a few minutes. It's a great way to make sure that when the volunteers come in for the next event, that things are all ready to go. Some more operations. So one of the biggest problem we see concession stands are the lines. So some suggestions to help alleviate that. A menu, digital options are easy. On the menu, I would recommend limiting the items to, no more than 10. Because what happens is someone comes up, one, it's hard to manage that many items and buy them and keep inventory. But two, when the people come up to order, there's so many options, it takes them a long time. So, you could have your 1, 2, or 3 combo meals, 5 options for candy and then 5 options for soda. And I think you'll find that your lines are going to move quicker. People will order more if you kind of lump it together and make it easy for them. If you get too much, it's just too hard for people to decide. Consider a pre-order or QR code or ticketing system. You can do this with BoosterHub tickets right now. You can make your combo meals in such a ticket and scan it when people pick it up and hand it to them. We do have a mobile ordering module that'll be coming out late this year that will give you a full-blown mobile ordering platform so that you can have people order from their phones and just come up and pick it up at the window. A lot of clubs recommend a drinks only lane or drinks and snacks, like drinks and candy. And then that lets the people who want to order food and think about it more complicated and have to wait in another line and just get those drinks and waters in a separate line. And that can really help reduce those wait times. If you can have items prepped, like we used to do the nachos, we'd have the trays of chips ready. We wouldn't put the cheese on until the order came, just to keep it fresh, but we'd have it all ready to go. Same thing with like hot dogs. You can prep them and put them in the buns and roll them in the foil so that all you're having to do is grab them and go. And, try to set a goal of 90 seconds for your service time. If you can get from the order to delivery in 90 seconds, you should be good to go. Tiffany, estimated time frame for the mobile ordering. I don't have it yet. We just added it to the roadmap in our last update. I would say it's probably going to be end of the year. You can do it now. It's just there's not a notification system. So if you can self-manage the notifications, you can do it now with the ticketing system. Our team would be happy to walk you through that. And how to maximize the profit. So first of all, plan your menu ahead. Budget for profit. So you want to make sure you're picking those items that have high margins. You want your food cost to be about 25 to 35% of the selling price. Buy in bulk, Sam's, Costco, Amazon, great options. Some school districts have contracts with PepsiCo or some local supplier, and you may be able to get some good deals there. You want to track your waste. So I don't see a lot of booster clubs doing this, but again, this goes back to tracking the inventory. If we bought 25 hot dogs and we only sold 10, what happened to the other 15? Did they get thrown away? Did we cook too many? So again, on that strategic level, these are questions you want to be asking. If we bought 20 Chick-fil-A sandwiches or 50 Chick-fil-A sandwiches and we only sold 20, we need to put that in our strategy to make sure we don't do that again, because it will impact our profit. If you're making food items, consider portion control. Make sure we're not dumping a whole bunch on. You're just like a restaurant here. You're trying to minimize your food costs and get the same portion out to everyone. Combo meals, again, are great. Like when you give somebody an easy button to buy 3 or 4 things, they're going to buy all 3 or 4 of them. You can add a little margin on there, and it's going to increase your total sales. It's going to make things easier because you can sell a lot of the same product instead of people picking and choosing 2 or 3 different ones. Have your cashiers, maybe in their little training video, always suggest, hey, would you like chips with that? Would you like a dessert with that? We have fresh made cookies, or can we add a hot chocolate for you? So a lot of times people say, yeah, sure. And then that's just an extra item sold. And then if you can sell before games, or if you can sell before tournaments, my daughter was a volleyball player. We hosted these 3-day volleyball tournaments, and we would send out to all the coaches ahead of time an online menu where they could pay. Then the players could come up and show us their receipt, and we'd have those meals ready to go. And they were just kind of preset meals, a sandwich, a cookie, and a chip, and a drink or something like that. And it makes things a lot faster. And you can also, again, if you get those sales ahead of time, you know how much to buy, so you have less waste. This is just a per item profit calculator. It's pretty simple. I do have a link for this for you at the end. But again, you'll take your total purchase price, divide it by the number of units, get a cost per unit, and then you can get your total cost, your selling price, your profit, what your food cost is, and your markup. So this is a great way to make sure that you're meeting kind of those targets of about 20 to 30% food cost, and you're not losing money on items. So if if you're doing something more complex, it's got a lot of ingredients. A hot dog's pretty simple, but you'll want to run it through something like this just to make sure that your margins are good. This is just a sample of profit by sales, of how many units we sold, cost and price per unit, and then our profit per unit and our total sold. So again, something you may want to estimate before an event and then check it afterwards. How did we do? Did we actually meet those numbers? And if not, why? And then some tips and tricks. This is one of the suggestions here is, to make the combo meal, give a QR code to buy it. A lot of people go on and do this. Share your equipment with other boosters. We talked about that. Buy in bulk with other boosters. So if you are, fall sport, talk to all the other fall sports. What are they buying? Can we buy it together and share the cost? Offer pre-order for those really big events. That's a great way to get all those orders in ahead of time and also know how much to buy. Use your inventory tracking to adjust your supply, and then track your annual events. So for instance, a football game, we all know that there's like rivalry games and a lot more people attend. So when you're looking at your reports from last year, compare those types of games with, the same type of game, because you may need very different amounts of food depending on who you're playing or what the event is. So make sure that you're comparing year over year for the same type of event. Offer family packs. So if you want to do, hey, let's do 4 hot dogs and 4 sodas and 4 this for $25. Again, simplify the ordering and try to find ways to maximize what you're selling. And then be sure to promote your concessions on social media if you have an app, via the app or via announcer. So what we would do at our volleyball games is we would have the announcer announce concessions at the beginning, and then at the middle part, we would put something on sale and have them announce. And towards the end, if we made cookies, he'd say there's fresh cookies. And that really just brings awareness to people that it's there and they should go do it. If you have an app that you communicate with, send out a note. Hey, it's the 3rd quarter, so hot dogs are now $1. So I try not to leave anything unsold, particularly hot food, in a concession stand. even at the very end, if I'm just selling it for cost, like how can I get rid of this? How can I get money to pay for this, to get costs? So be a promoter, think of the sandwich board guy out there walking around trying to sell stuff. We've got a lot of great digital tools plus announcements and things like that. I see how much of a discount for family packs or combos. I actually don't recommend a discount. You may want to throw in a little bit, 50 cents or something. It's really more for ease of ordering. So most people aren't going to add up that the chips are $2 and the sandwich is $4 and the drink is $2. And so that would be $8. So if you just say it's $8, they're not going to individualize it. They're going to go, oh, I'll have the combo with a Coke and a chip. So it just makes it easier for people to order. And that's how you end up selling more, because you actually don't even discount those combos. Another recommendation is to keep some frozen items on hand. If you have the ability and you've got a freezer, this is a great way to be strategic about like, hey, we're going to sell more than we thought. So we used to do this for our tournaments because some years we would sell a lot and some years we wouldn't. So if we had the frozen items, we could use them throughout the season, or turn them into player meals or something like that. So that's a really good tip. If you're slow, send somebody out in the crowd, get somebody out there. We've got hot dogs, we've got beef sandwiches, we've got Cokes, on sale. You will get people's attention. They will come, and they will do it. If you don't have a big group of volunteers and the workload's too much, consider outsourcing it. Sometimes we see food trucks or third-party vendors come in and handle concessions. It's an option. I kind of love the community of running a concession stand with your volunteers, but it's an option for some programs. If you have a payment system fail, this is something that can happen. Internet can go down, and then, oh my gosh, just put a QR code for general donation. That's actually a really good idea anyways. General donation to the program, and then people can go on their phones and, if you give them a hot dog, they can donate $2 or $5 and at least you're getting some money out of it. So just a suggestion there. We've seen that happen. Have your cashier suggest an additional donation for the club at checkout. So, hey, can you support our band? Would you like to donate additional $1, $2, or $5? Most people will say yes. It's just a nice way to increase those sales. Consider adopting a theme and doing it long term. So as I mentioned, we have a football program in Texas that does a fish fry on Friday nights, and all the visiting teams know that if you go there, you can go to their concessions and have the fish fry on Friday night. So consider making something your program's sort of signature event or signature food, and then when people come to visit your location, you can have that, and that gets a following, gets people excited. You can also price those things a little bit higher. And then again, last quarter liquidation, drop those prices, particularly on your perishable items, things that you can't hold over to the next event. Do not walk away with any food unsold. That's my motto about running concessions, is even if you sell it at cost, that helps put your margins up there for the whole event. So don't let any food go unsold. So then what I like to hear is we have a concession stand strategy and every event is profitable. So that's really what we want to see with concessions. You're putting a lot of time and a lot of work into this, so there should be a good return on it. So it's definitely something you want to strategize on. I've got a QR code here. That's for those cost tools that we saw. We've got the item cost calculator, menu profitability, break-even analysis, and an event sales tracker. This link will also be in the follow-up email, so you can get it there. I'll leave this up for just a minute. Any other questions? Yeah, I see some questions on the ticketing system. So if you're on BoosterHub, you can use the store. And what I recommend is creating like your combos or meal deals as a ticket. That's the product type in BoosterHub, is a ticket. And what that does is the purchaser can buy it online and they can come up to you with their QR coded ticket, and you can scan it from the BoosterHub app and deliver them their food. So if you do that, you'll want to set your online transaction sales to someone who's getting the notifications that those sales are coming in. And then you can use those tickets to scan the QR code so that the people got their item. So it's a great way to kind of do those online, those pre-sales, sort of mobile. It's really is mobile ordering. It's just a little bit creative because it's not the final system yet, but that's a great way to do it. It's